I'm a developer, pretend, and the developer community out there. Why should we, instead of a Thompson or a Moxie, why should I come to one of your brands? Welcome to Teague Talks. Today we're sitting down with Phil Zrihen, head of Americas and COO for Ennismore. Phil, thanks for having us today.
Thanks for being here.
And thanks for kicking everybody out of the office, by the way, so we could have a little
A
private.
lot of work, but we've done it. It's great.
We are in the Ennismore headquarters in Brooklyn, Williamsburg, New York. Beautiful offices, looks like a hotel.
It's like a Hoxton.
Yeah, so Ennismore to me is a global collection of brands. 15 brands or so,
Correct.
lifestyle brands.
That's right.
Your story resonates with us. For a lot of developers out here, myself included, sort of the constant juggle and tug of war between business and hospitality, right? Between profits and delivering a great guest experience. Of course, I got to start with who is Phil and how did Phil get here? So what I love about you is now you're the head of these hospitality brands, which makes you, in my world, a creative.
Mm-hmm.
Except that I know you spent 20 years as an investment banker, which makes you an evil capitalist like the rest of us.
Correct.
So start me out though, but I got to go way back to a young Phil Zrihen growing up in Canada. I don't know, I'm just envisioning skating on the frozen pond, playing hockey with his buddies.
Pretty accurate. Growing up in Montreal, kind of hockey's in the DNA. Normal childhood in Canada, just going through what somebody typically goes through. Grew up in a great family, kind of focused on working hard and seeing where things could take me. I always thought that banking was interesting to me. Finance in particular had a particular appeal. A very kind of competitive upbringing given some of the sports I played, and I always thought that finance or the stock market was pretty similar. So I was looking for an opportunity to kind of apply that type of meritocracy environment in what ended up doing, and Wall Street was kind of the appeal for that reason.
Did you always have Wall Street? What did mom and dad do?
My dad was an accountant for the government, and my mother was a librarian, so pretty straightforward.
Yeah. Wall Street always on the brain. I'm going to go to New York and.
It wasn't really I'm going to go to New York. It was just I want to kind of get into finance. And then when you start discovering more about the job and the opportunity, you understand that New York is where it's going to be if you can make it happen. So I started out working actually in Montreal after graduating from McGill, and then evolved into working in Toronto. And then in 2000, I was working at 2 or 3 in the morning, as we tended to do in investment banking.
Yep.
And I had a colleague come back from New York saying they're looking for bankers like crazy there. There's a tech boom and they're really looking for people, so you should think about it. And I went home, woke up my then girlfriend, who's now my wife, and said, I want to go to New York to interview. That was a Sunday. I went there on a Thursday and we moved 3 weeks later. That's how intense the environment was at that time.
Sure.
And then kind of made my way to Wall Street, kind of where it's at, and then from there evolved.
What firm? What firm in New York?
Lehman Brothers.
Of course.
So Lehman was a different Lehman than what he became when I started. Kind of a second tier type firm, which was an amazing entrepreneurial type environment. And had a really, really good time for about 4 years, and then progressed past that into other firms in banking. And what was interesting is when I started at Lehman, as I mentioned, it was quite entrepreneurial. And that's what I liked about it. And then Lehman decided to try to be really a top tier firm, becoming more of a, call it one-stop shop, where it was about going to investors or clients and saying, we can do everything. What do you want us to do for you? And that became a little less appealing for me because it became a very commoditized type of transactional approach. It wasn't about what I could bring or what somebody else could bring. It was really about the firm and just being part of a cog. And that's not really why I got into finance in the first place. So I started kind of looking for opportunities that were more individual, that were more advisory focused, and moved into working at Rothschild for that reason, which is a real, truly advisory shop where you went to clients and said, here's my way of thinking, hopefully we can agree. And it's much harder to get business, but if you get it, it's much more satisfying. And that's why I evolved into more of an advisory type setting. So Rothschild first, and then Houlihan Lokey So that was about 18, 19 years of banking.
Yeah, that's a long time.
It is.
What lessons do you think you learned, and how do you think it transformed you?
Honestly, probably the biggest lesson is that it's more important to work smart than to just go crazy and work hard. In banking, there is a tendency to be there for FaceTime and impress and just do a lot of things for show. Over time, you realize that results come from working intelligently, delivering, and not so much all of the sizzle that maybe people get caught up in.
How much was it relationships, both internal and external, did you learn?
At the end of the day, I'm a big believer that being liked, getting along with people, being relatable over and above the core competencies is incredibly important. And that comes with having mutual respect, being able to listen, and just interacting. So no matter what business you're in, and especially in finance and advisory, it's really about connecting with people, and that's no different than what we do now.
Right. How did you transition? How did you get into
Yeah.
the hotel business as from an investment bank?
You know, I enjoyed banking, but after 19 years, it becomes a bit repetitive. And I always thought that if I left banking, I couldn't quite identify why I would leave it for, but once the opportunity showed itself, I would know it. And I was always a believer that it would be in something that I enjoyed as a core function. And as I was in banking, started in technology, and then technology started evolving into travel technology, IT services, and then within travel, it became real estate. So things just happen. And that's kind of a lesson that I've learned, which is you can't really predict too far ahead. Take it day by day and see what happens. So I progressed into really focusing on travel, tourism, hospitality. And for whatever reason, like anybody else trying to make a name for myself, I was identifying niches that I thought could use advisory. So the REITs at the time were well banked, the corporate hotel companies were well banked. What really wasn't properly banked was the evolving lifestyle companies. And the reason it wasn't well banked was because you couldn't really rely on transactions. So as a banker, you make money if you transact. So not many bankers were willing to invest the time into companies that they didn't know would actually deliver. But because I had nothing to lose, I would just cold call a bunch of different companies, whether it be Morgan's Hotel Group at the time or other companies, and see what could unfold. And slowly but surely, it was the right time because more transactions occurred in the space. We became, as a firm, regarded within real estate and within hospitality and within lifestyle. And we're able to kind of develop a niche for ourselves. So for me, it kind of met all the different components that I was looking for.
So I like it. It's still this, again, we're into this yin and yang of profits versus guests, clients, what have you. So doing what's best. So we still got this tug of war.
Yeah, it was interesting because I was introduced to a different way of thinking about things. Because as you suggest, in typical hospitality, whether it be the corporates or the REITs, you can really point to the bottom line as success. But when you're looking at lifestyle brands at the time and now, it's really about some intangibles that drive the customer to the hotel, the experience, what you feel, and you can't really measure that in pure numbers. So you have to, by nature, kind of gain an appreciation for what that means and be willing to strike a balance between the economics and the sustainability of the model because of those intangibles. So when I was dealing with these companies early on, that was something I had to be sensitive to because you're obviously dealing with, in many cases, founders who've started this company from scratch, who have an appreciation for numbers, but that's not what drives them at all. And they really don't have much patience or tolerance if that's the angle you're taking. So you have to be sensitive to what they're looking for, and for good reason. That's what made them successful.
How do you get ROI on vibe?
At the end of the day, the goal when you're thinking about growing a business and economics is really critical mass and scale. And for the longest time, there was a disconnect between lifestyle brands and being able to achieve that growth. Because the idea was you'd be diluting the message. If the appeal is we have this hotel or these two hotels and they're so unique and that's what they're attracting customers, the idea of replicating them was kind of a misnomer and not doable. And that was kind of the approach for the longest time in lifestyle. And you had groups who were trying to find the Holy Grail, but couldn't really strike a balance, partially because you had founders and leaders who weren't willing to let go of the control that got them there to help drive the growth platform. When we created Ennismore, the idea was to see if we could thread that needle. And the organization was set up with that purpose solely in mind, to say, let us aggregate these brands, but really, really focus on a daily basis, ensuring that they stay true to themselves, that we do focus on ROI and economics, but not at the expense of the experience. And that started by setting up the organization in a certain way, where you had brand champions driving each individual brand whose sole responsibility was to ensure that the brand stay true to themselves. That was the first key component. The second was to, where possible, keep the individual founders of the brand involved in the business to keep us honest. And it's been 4.5 years, and I think we've done a pretty good job, because it really is a laser focus of ours to not lose sight of that balance.
Yeah, so when I think of lifestyle, I think of one, it's lifestyle for the guest, but it's also traditionally been lifestyle for the owner operator. I mean, you take an extreme, it's, oh, I want to go sell apples on the beach or be a bartender at a tiki hut. But that's sort of what lifestyle for the operator. How do you then replicate that and take that just passion, for lack of a better word, and keep that passion genuine over multiple different opportunities?
I mean, that's the big question.
Right.
And it starts with people. It starts with having people on the ground, and people, in our case, kind of above property, that are really, really passionate about what we are delivering. And it goes beyond just financial results. It is about delivering experiences, because when we talk about lifestyle, that's what lifestyle it is. It means a holistic vibe when you walk into a hotel that transcends just the rooms or the restaurant. It's everything. So when you walk in, you feel like you're being immersed in different types of senses and experiences. And that starts with the people you're interacting with on a daily basis. So when we talk about our business, it's not like we have a bench of 500 general managers that are just here waiting to join our company for a particular hotel. It's creating a culture that is appealing to certain types of individuals when we need them to grow our platforms. That's a key component of it. But no, to answer the question, it is about people, and it's about taking that passion and not just being focused on commoditization, and really fighting the urge to just render things so efficient that you lose the edge that you have.
Yes. So Ennismore is, in my understanding, is a management company and a brand. So we're going to operate the asset and brands, and there are 15, right?
That's right.
Lifestyle brands.
That's right.
That all still have a founder and a visionary of those brands.
For the overwhelming majority, that is right. That is correct.
Yes.
Driving the brands.
Driving the brands, they had a vision, and now you're trying to figure out how to get that visionary and connect them with this broader company.
Exactly.
Importantly, Ennismore, and then Ennismore is partnered with Accor.
Correct.
So
Yeah.
a lot of the brands are in Europe and global. So how do you keep that uniqueness as a part, also being part of this larger?
So what we tried to do was to offer a model to potential owners that covered everything they could be looking for. And the benefit to them is that we do come with the unique lifestyle DNA, but in the background you have Accor, the second largest hotel company on the planet, that really provides the comfort to owners that they are getting the clout, the sales, the loyalty, the distribution, all the things that put people in beds, in addition to the DNA that we at Ennismore bring. So we have an affiliation with Accor, which allows us to do that. So when we approach owners, we say you get the best of all worlds. And it resonates, and it's, it reflected in our aggressive growth that owners are latching onto it. And ultimately, you sometimes have owners who say, I get the Accor piece, but I really want the Ennismore piece, and they kind of lean into that. And you have others who say, I take a ton of comfort from Accor, and they lean into that. And we can be malleable depending on the interactions. But at the end of the day, we do try to provide a full service solution by combining those two pieces.
Name me some of the brands.
Delano,
Yep.
SLS,
Yep.
Mondrian, Hoxton, 25 Hours. We have a collaboration with Banyan Tree. So it runs the gamut. European, US based, kind of anywhere from your more mid-scale lifestyle brand all the way up to super luxury. So we do offer a full menu to owners. And what's interesting that I think has changed in lifestyle over the past decade or so is that in the past, you would have imagined there'd be a customer for a Delano and a different customer for a Mama Shelter. That's no longer the case. We really have one customer that likes to experience all brands. And I think that's changed in how lifestyle has evolved, which makes our kind of life a little easier because we do offer so many different brands. And it's interesting because one of the predecessor companies from Ennismore is a company called SB, where I came from. And at SB, there was a major focus on having brands within SB, but really marketing SB as the umbrella. At Ennismore, there was a decision made to focus primarily on the individual brands and less the umbrella of Ennismore, going back to ensuring the real authenticity of each individual unique brand that we brought to the table. So it was a strategic decision, and the fact that there is more awareness about the individual brands and Ennismore as a platform is not surprising, it's deliberate.
How did we get from investment banking to Ennismore? I know it was the SBE and Morgans and all of that. Walk me through that timeline.
Yeah.
Because that's a big change in your life.
Totally. I think what's interesting also is that the more you progress in investment banking, the less likely you are to make a move, just because
Golden
things
handcuffs.
happen. Exactly, golden handcuffs. And for me, the idea was always if I was going to make a move, I kind of wanted to go through the front door, not the back door. In other words, I didn't really want to take a major hit in different areas, either in terms of compensation or seniority, to get somewhere else. I kind of had that view of I really am looking for an opportunity where I can kind of go in at the same level I'm at right now. May not happen, but that was my idea.
Sure.
So in 2015, Morgan's Hotel Group, which I had mentioned earlier, was looking to sell itself. And a company called SBE was approached as a potential suitor. And SBE contacted me to see if we'd advise them on looking at the acquisition of Morgan's. We got involved. It took a good 2 years to consummate that deal. I became quite close to the founder of SBE, a kind of visionary founder named Sam Zrihen. And after we finally concluded the acquisition, Sam said, "Do you want to join me at SBE to help run the company?" And putting all the things we discussed together in terms of there being a white space in lifestyle, a super interesting industry that I was into, a platform that made sense, it was the right time, and I made the switch. So that's how that evolved. But in a lot of ways, that was going to be the answer. It had to be a relationship that developed in terms of, hey, I know what you can do based on what you've done. I want you to join me and make it happen.
We keep talking about the people all the time, right? The connection. And so it's not just the what, it's the who.
Exactly.
And in your world, it was Sam.
Totally. It really comes down to the relationships and trust. When I think about most of the jobs I've gotten in my career, I feel like I've known that they were going to occur after the first meeting, because it's about the connection, not about the resume, not about trying to convince people of something on paper. It's really about what you can do beyond that.
So I'm curious, what was Sam's vision and what was his vision for you?
In a lot of ways, Sam is kind of a creative genius.
Yes.
Where there are numerous ideas going through his mind at all times. The thought of having somebody who had a more maybe analytical, I think the word is negatorian, my family calls me negatorian, kind of bringing things down to size, realist, to add some maybe order to the chaos, what was helpful. So we had a good kind of yin and yang for 5 years of that balance where, he'd be throwing out these amazing ideas, and then he would need me and others to say, this can happen, this cannot happen, and he'd say, no, it can happen, and we'd have a back and forth, and that's how the company grew.
So SBE merges with Morgan's to become one big company.
Correct.
Under Sam's leadership.
Takes Morgan's private, and then we start growing the brands aggressively, have some growing pains in terms of trying to manage a much larger company, which needed a different type of discipline.
Right.
But we figured it out, and it just happened that 2 years later, every single large hotel company was very focused on getting into lifestyle, whatever that meant.
Right.
So we started fielding inbound from, you name it, the Hiltons, the Hyatts, IHGs of the world, and Accor. And because we were so busy trying to just run the business, we had no time to engage in a long song and dance as to whether or not this could work or that could work with this company. We really needed to either do something or not do something. And another major visionary, Sebastian Bazin from Accor, kind of exudes that type of approach, which is let's figure out the broad construct of a deal and then let's just get it done, versus the other way around.
Yeah.
And that was just the right fit for us at SBE. So Accor bought half of SBE in 2018. And then for a couple of years, we benefited from what they brought to us and hopefully what we brought to them. And then in 2020, they bought the balance of SBE. And that coincided with the creation of Ennismore, where SBE's brands were then rolled into a slew of other brands to create Ennismore, being all of the lifestyle brands that Accor had invested in up until that point, with the thesis of creating this new umbrella company that would be lifestyle focused, lifestyle centric, a certain culture, and kind of got created in a JV form with the Accor brands and then Hoxton.
How's that working today?
So it's great. As I mentioned, the idea was to really thread the needle between the critical mass that you seek with the unique DNA of lifestyle brands. And it's been 4.5 years. We have been growing exponentially. The numbers keep on changing, but we have about 150 hotels open, another 140 or so in the pipeline globally. And it's just about appealing to owners and what we bring to the table.
Yeah, and who's opening those? It's owners and developers, franchisees?
Mostly,
it's not you guys.
Mostly owners where we manage.
Thank you.
And in some cases where we license our brands.
Okay. I'm a developer, pretend, and the developer community out there. Why should we come and partner with you guys rather than what I'm going to say, what we've known up to this point as lifestyles from Hilton and Marriott and IHG? Why should, instead of a Thompson or a Moxie, why should I come to one of your brands?
So in lifestyle, the brands matter and the experience matters. And when we think about lifestyle, we really do think about having an all-encompassing, holistic approach to the overall offering, which means design, it means food and beverage, it means wellness, it means the experience of the in-room experience. It's all those things put together. And many of our competitors have some of those things, not all of those things. So when we built the business, the idea was to have a focus on content. We see the hotel itself being kind of a vessel for content. So we create content from a central location with a perspective on everything, not just a couple of things. So we have a central partnership studio, we have a central design studio, we have a central food and beverage studio that allows us to really keep an eye on the pulse of everything happening in the space and making sure that what we provide is comprehensive and not just one aspect of it. And you add to that the fact that we have brands that really created the lifestyle space. Delano, the first hotel really identified as lifestyle by Ian Traeger in Miami, that's our brand. Mondrian, SLH, each of them have their own unique approach to lifestyle that was revolutionary at the time, and back to the main theme of us trying to keep that up and reinvent it in a smart way.
So our developers, right? If I'm a developer and I've been doing Hiltons and Marriotts and Hyatts and IHGs, whether that's a Courtyard or a Hampton, and now I've moved into an Autograph or by Marriott or a Tempo by Hilton, and that's my lifestyle experience. But even those are still very sort of within the lines. They're not going to let you go too far. And most of the developers, I might say, actually appreciate that because I might get too far out of my skis and mucks up the bottom line or muck something up. So how do you guys thread that needle and keep it unique and yet?
So we really take pride in being flexible when we talk to owners, which is a big positive, I think. A lot of owners really don't want to be told you have to have a room size of exactly this. You have to operate this way. So of course, within reason, we try to really be flexible to allow them to express their own creativity in the box that they are constructing or converting. Because a lot of these lifestyle owners are second generation, third generation, right, trying to make their mark differently than their parents did. And that means moving away from some of the brands you mentioned into more lifestyle brands. So we try to appeal to them and work with them to say, how can we create a vision together? You know, half of our owners come to us and say, I want this brand or that brand. The other half come and say, I want lifestyle. Whatever that means, you tell me. Yeah. So we really start with a blank canvas and work with them. And I think that a lot of them appreciate the compatibility of trying to just say, let's take this somewhere together versus this is what it has to be. When you combine that with the Accor angle which gives them the comfort that, independent of this creative process, there is the affiliation with the core, which helps us feel comfortable about the kind of pure, bare bones, basic elements of hospitality. It's a good mix.
Let's talk about markets. Can lifestyle work anywhere? I mean, clearly it can work in Brooklyn, it can work in Miami. Can it work in Atlanta, Georgia? Can it work in Plano, Texas?
It's a really good question, and I think the answer is absolutely yes. And it's a function of how the industry has evolved, because in the past, lifestyle tended to be, in my view, you would go to a lifestyle hotel if you were cool. Now you go to a lifestyle hotel to feel cool, and you can feel cool anywhere. And because lifestyle has been adopted from you have to be in a gateway city like London or Miami, New York, to you can be anywhere as long as the product fits itself, it can work. So we have brands whose thesis is specifically to be put into the markets that you mentioned, the tertiary, secondary markets, because the box lends itself to that. If you could have, just to pick on Courtyard Marriott, if you could have a Courtyard Marriott box, but instead of going downstairs to the lobby and seeing your Starbucks kind of outlet and your table and your 5 p.m. buffet, but more have an actually activated experience that really brings out energy into the guest, why wouldn't you do that? Why wouldn't that be more appealing to the consumer? Not everybody, but a lot of the consumers. And that is where we come at it from.
I used to do lifestyle with people that were cool, and now it's people who want to feel cool.
In the 90s, it was intimidating to go into a lifestyle hotel. You'd kind of walk in and say, can I walk in? Can I just walk into this hotel? Because I need to be a certain type of individual to do that. Now you walk in to be made to feel like that individual. That's kind of our mantra.
Fascinating. And that can be anyone.
21 years, 20, 80, 90, I mean, it's crazy. That's the whole movement.
Is that movement in the hospitality industry going to continue?
Absolutely. I can't explain why that is, but I think everybody is looking to be taken to a different place, a better place, a self-actualized place, and the more connection you make, the more energy you have, the better it is. And I think lifestyle has also just evolved over time. It was much more limiting 15 years ago. You used to go to a hotel in Miami that was lifestyle, and the idea was you'd go there, you'd go out at night, you'd wake up, maybe a little hungover, you go to the beach and start all over again.
Right.
Now, lifestyle means I need to find some time to work, I need to find time to work out, and that's all part of it. So if we're not delivering what people are looking for, then there's no point. So that means nutrition, that means having all different kind of components of what people ultimately live for. That's lifestyle. And I think a big shift occurred during COVID. People were forced to combine all their different life experiences in one setting, where in the past it was, I'll go here for work, I'll go here for play. That became, I guess I can do all these things together. I can wake up in the morning, I can work out, I can then do some work in my living room, and that's what is being recreated now in the industry, because why not?
Yeah, I'm staying at the Hoxton here in Brooklyn, beautiful hotel, but the lobby, you could just tell, it was
always activated.
Always activated. Even the classic headphones and a computer, spending my day here, I suppose, the remote office.
As a brand, Hoxton is probably the most authentic, I would say, in terms of what people say about it. You just feel like you're in a real type of experience that you can pinpoint. And if you go to any Hoxton around the world at any time, the lobby is full of people exactly how you're describing, just wanting to be there with their kind of peers and whatever that means, but just kind of enjoying themselves.
What other global trends are you seeing?
So we're trying to push the envelope and redefine what lifestyle is. One of the key focus areas that we have is all-inclusive. And all-inclusive, as we all know, at least in North America, has tended to be a little type of perspective, which is all you can eat, certain type of customer, not really where you want to be in an elevated experience. And we've tried to turn that on its head a little bit. We have a platform out of the Middle East called Rixos, which is very, very high-end luxury all-inclusive, which in itself is different. And now in the Americas, we're bringing Rixos here, but in addition, we're opening all-inclusive lifestyle hotels. We just opened one in Cancun called SLS Playa Mujeres.
Okay.
Very, very lifestyle-driven, but all-inclusive. And again, in that case, all-inclusive means not only all the food you can eat, but it means all the wellness you can have, all the entertainment you can have, and connecting with programming on a daily basis that gets people out of their rooms and into the common areas. That's the focus. And so far it's been great. It's been open for 5 months. It really has worked in terms of demonstrating that you can do that in that setting. And that means we don't have food outlets. We have branded restaurant outlets that you will recognize from any other lifestyle hotel that we have, which makes a big difference. So as a customer, you're not going to, oh, today I'm doing Asian cuisine or I'm doing steak. Here I'm going to an actual restaurant that has an appeal in its own right. So it's very, very well thought through to bring the lifestyle experience to this setting.
When I think of all-inclusive in Cancun, I think of watered-down drinks,
100%.
some resort pool on a beach, drinking way too much, getting a sunburn, pass out, do it again.
So this resort is actually, it's 20 minutes outside Cancun in Playa Mujeres, and it's divided informally into two components. One that is adult-driven, the other that is more family-driven. Both of which we define as lifestyle, by the way. Because if you're a certain age group and you have kids of a certain age, 5, 8, 9, whatever it is, you still are interested in having a certain type of experience. You don't want to have your typical historical experience. So we really try to bridge the gap between the two of them and offer different experiences in that hotel. That's an example.
What else are we doing?
The word of the day is wellness across the board in the industry. And we're firm believers that that doesn't mean just having a great gym or a great spa. I think people want to feel that they are being curated to. The same way that you have a waiter come to you when you're ordering a meal and tell you what makes sense, what doesn't make sense on the menu, that's what we see wellness as being. So when we are now programming our venues, it's about all the different components that people go into feeling good about themselves. And frankly, we and others are limited by the historical boxes that we've had in the past. So we have to be flexible in terms of are we programming around the actual box in the city we're in. For new resorts, it's much easier because we can kind of curate the experience, and for certain brands, it becomes a brand pillar. But it's not an afterthought because people demand it. So we are laser focused on how we take this to the next level.
Is that across all brands? Or are there
It has to be across all brands. Some brands more than others, by definition, but it cannot be ignored anymore. Back to my point about you have a customer that tries all our different hotels, you have to appeal to that customer. Another brand that we just collaborated with is called Habitas.
Okay.
So Habitas is really a different form of glamping, if you will. We call it barefoot luxury. It's an amazing concept where you are experiencing really luxury in a tent-like setting, but you are going to immerse yourself, better yourself. You're not being distracted by the external parts of the world. You are really kind of inward looking. It's in a usually kind of a reclusive type setting to ensure that you are kind of getting away from it all, but you feel like you're being pampered, but really kind of on a scale that is touchy-feely, for lack of a better word. The industry is always trying to reinvent itself and trying to see where the customer wants to take it. And it's a bit of a pendulum where people move from, I'm really interested in super, super luxury, and then kind of stepping back and saying, okay, now I need to really ground myself, center myself, and take some time to myself. And that is what this type of concept allows one to do. So the idea that we can offer, run the gamut in terms of what we can offer all the way upscale down to an experience like this at Habitas is part of the equation to allow customers to dictate what they want at any given time, and they can pick and choose. And it's just a question of identifying trends that we think make sense. And I really do think that COVID played a major part in forcing people to start looking inward as to what this all meant. And these types of concepts evolve from that because you just kind of gravitate towards a more simplistic approach.
You just look happy and relaxed and energized. And I'm trying to picture the 20-year investment banker, Phil, and would we be friends or not?
That's interesting. The one thing that I think is very important, no matter where you are in your career, is that you feel empowered to do what's right for you. And my focus was always never to feel like I was trapped, ever. And investment banking can be made to feel that way, where you just have to work harder and stay longer, and back to your point about golden handcuffs. And the idea of just being able to challenge yourself, thrive, but ultimately not take it too seriously, the more senior you get, the older you get, the more experience you have, that comes naturally. And if you can combine that with day-to-day experience that is stimulating, interesting, in an industry that you enjoy because people enjoy, then it's kind of the holy grail.
Yeah, that's powerful.
Yeah.
So what more advice would you give to sort of this next generation that's trying to struggle and find their path?
I would say there's a tendency to believe that if you walk into a group setting or a meeting, you're all going to walk out knowing what the person who knew the most going in knows. And ideally, you'd all walk out with everybody knowing more than they knew going in, which means people collaborating, working together, not egos getting in the way. So that's something that kind of was super important in investment banking, of going into a setting and trying to take the whole conversation to a different level, which is crucial to any advancement. Also, back to my point of when you're starting your career, it can be really, really stressful to not know what's going to happen next. And as you move through your career, you start enjoying that uncertainty. You start thriving on that uncertainty. The more options you have, the better it is. And not to get concerned if it's difficult to figure out where your next step is. Things will come, and just make sure you're taking one step forward, and then the rest of it will open up.
My father's generation, maybe your father's generation, was much more sort of dictatorial. Do it this way, don't ask too many questions. And now I'm sensing your leadership style, mine, sort of similar, is no, I don't have all the answers. What are you seeing, and how can you help?
Many times I would sit in my cubicle thinking to myself,
Yeah.
I can't be the only person who's thinking what I'm thinking. And you mix that with maybe a culture of individuals in senior roles whose view was, because we were trained a certain way, because the negatives that we felt were the way they were,
Right.
we have to implement them on others.
Right.
And my focus was, why not use this opportunity to change? So all the things that I wanted when I was starting out, I assume are the things for the most part that people who are now starting out would like as well. So my approach is simply to be intuitive about that and to try to not have any pretense in terms of what we are delivering as an organization, what leadership we're trying to apply, and just say, let's have a conversation. Your ideas are welcome. We may not always agree, but how is it not better to have a free-flowing dialogue? And how is it not more empowering than to just say, that's the way it is? So, it's not rocket science. Because at least what we do is so dependent on creativity and creative ideas, you're not going to let those flow out unless you have that type of dynamic. So although we are kind of in a typical business organization, a big part of what we do involves that kind of creativity. So we really owe it to ourselves and to everybody here to let that thrive. If we're going to succeed, we have to let the ideas come through, and that starts with the approach to the business that we discussed.
Yeah. So we're in New York this week talking to a lot of people about international travel, obviously. Do you think that's a short-term or long-term issue?
Maybe I'm an eternal optimist, but I think that things will level. There's a lot of, I would say, posturing going on, a lot of aggressive stances being taken, but I think that everybody can sense that I hope this is somewhat short-term. We have a very, very good history as an industry of adapting as appropriate, and we will adapt. So I'm bullish for 2025. There are certain markets, at least in hospitality, that are more likely to do very well. Obviously, we're being impacted by geopolitical issues, wars, and so on and so forth. But we have adapted quite well, and we'll continue to adapt. So I'm bullish.
What markets are going to do well? You mentioned it.
I think the Americas will do well, notwithstanding the short-term issues. And the Middle East. The Middle East is a big growth market for us and others, and I think that will continue to thrive. And Europe's still trying to find its way, and I think it's going to take a little longer, but the Middle East and the Americas are looking quite strong.
I love your outlook, especially from an operator. I mean, I'm in New York. We just did a bunch of meetings up and down Wall Street yesterday, and they're clearly nervous. The Main Street guys, not nearly as much.
Exactly. Well, Wall Street, that's the nature of the beast.
Correct.
It's fairly short-term, it's immediate,
Yes.
there needs to be some certainty. There's no room for a bit of ambiguity. And what we do, it's a little different. So we'll be fine.
Talk to me specifically about Ennismore in 2025. What can we expect in the future from you guys?
The Delano in the mid-90s was the first real lifestyle hotel. It reinvented the industry, or invented the industry, frankly. And after being closed for the past 6 years, it is being reopened at the end of this year, which is a big, big deal for us.
That is a big deal. Why was it closed for 6 years? COVID.
COVID and a full-blown renovation, sorely needed.
So it's going to be awesome when it opens.
It's a new chapter for Delano, because Delano for the longest time was one hotel.
Right.
But it was one hotel that everybody knew no matter where you were in the world. It was batting way above its weight in terms of brand recognition. Now Delano in Dubai is open, we have Delano in Paris, we have a big pipeline. So Miami will continue to be the flagship once it's reopened, but we're really, really excited about that. What we find, at least in the Americas, is when you have a lifestyle component and you're trying to sell it to owners, what works better than not is having owners who can kind of buy into your vision and find the appeal of your brands.
Right.
In the US, it's a very institutional market, very institutional market. It's Wall Street driven, it's financially driven. So you have a lot of owners who will come and say, I love your brands, but I like their brands as well. And whoever can give me the best deal,
Right, sure.
I'm gonna go with it. In Mexico, in the Caribbean, in the Middle East, for example, you still have high net worth individuals, different types of profiles for owners who like specific brands. They like our brands. They will work with us to make our brands work. So we obviously gravitate towards those markets because it's low-hanging fruit and that's easier growth for us. So when we think about kind of where we're going to grow, that's part of the driver for it too. We pride ourselves on being a global company for purely economic reasons in terms of diversification and so on and so forth, but also because that's what customers want. They want to be able to say, oh, I can go to this hotel here and that hotel there. It's a big part of our platform.
Phil, this is fantastic. Thank you
so much.
Thank you very much. Thanks for sharing, and thanks for opening up.
Awesome.